Alright, so the next slide gets on to flammable refrigerants. Once again, we've already kind of covered this. The 1234YF and the 152 are the only two that have been approved by the SNAP or EPA and are flammable. Which basically, when it says it's flammable, it means it can ignite under certain circumstances. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's um, you hold an open flame and it lights. It doesn't necessarily mean that it gets hit by a spark and it lights. That's all in your MSDS if you want to go check in on those. But under the right circumstance, it can ignite. If you have any other questions about any type of refrigerant whatsoever, for any reason, you're just curious, you want more information, whatever, EPA.gov, they have everything you need to know. They're the regulatory group, so if you ever have any questions about anything whatsoever, go to EPA.gov and you'll find all the information that you need. All right, 608 versus 609 certification. Okay, so the 609 mobile vehicle service and repair. Basically, the 609 is what you're getting. It's for industrial, it's for over the road, it's for automotive, you name it, it's for all of it. The 608, there's a type 1 and a type 2. The type 1 is for appliances, small appliances, refrigerators, stuff like that. The type 2 is for your bigger appliances and or your cargo units. So like a trailer, if you're pulling a cargo trailer full of, I don't know, dairy products, something like that, that would be the 608 type 2. And then there's a type 3, type 4, 608 as well. Honestly, the only 608 that you're ever going to see maybe is going to be the type 2 608. And that type 2 608 is going to be on a cargo trailer. Now, what that does mean though is it means you can't just walk in and start charging people to work on their refrigerators because you're certified, because you're not. You're 609 certified, not 608 type 1 certified, so you need to be careful when you're doing that. You can work on your own as long as you don't charge anybody. All right, so yeah, right here, 608 type 2, you're going to want to remember that for the test, is for cargo refrigeration and or buses. So that's the hydrochlorofluorocarbon 22 or the R22. You have to have the 608 type 22 for cargo refrigeration. Let's see, 608 versus 609 requirements. Under Section 608 of the Clean Air Act, intentional release or venting of any refrigerant is illegal unless the refrigerant is specifically exempted from the prohibition. So CO2, that's where it's getting into the CO2, it's not prohibited, so you can vent it out in the atmosphere. However, once again, the equipment, according to the EPA, has to be used on all motor vehicles. So you have to have registered recovery equipment. Even if CO2 is what's being used inside the system, you still have to use the equipment to evacuate it. You can't just release it to atmosphere. Do-it-yourselfers are not required to be certified, but they are required to use EPA tooling. Once again, you always have to use EPA tooling, period. So the equipment requirements, repair shops must use approved, certified recovery, recycling, and or recovery-only equipment. So when it says it has to be certified and approved, that basically every single piece of equipment that a shop owns, somebody who's going to bill someone to work on their AC system, all of that equipment has to be registered with the EPA. And you can go to that EPA.gov to get a registration form, or I think the manuals that are on our modules tab, I think they actually have them in there as well. You just have to make sure all your tools are registered. Now that's the shop's responsibilities, not the mechanic's responsibility. Let them worry about it. Usually when you buy it, they get handed the piece of paper and say, fill this out, turn it in. your manager took care of it. However, if ever someday you're a manager and somebody hands you a piece of paper for a new tool, make sure you get it filled out. Um, Repair shop owners, managers must register their recovery equipment with the appropriate EPA regional office. Once again, and look, sure enough, that manual that's online under the modules tab that I said you guys could download clear back in video one. If you go to page 57, 58, you'll find the paperwork you got to fill out. Let's see, recovery only equipment. Okay, there's always going to be a question on recovery only equipment. So the nice new machines, they recover. So that means they pull all of the freon out of a system. Then they recycle, which basically means they clean that freon. They get all the water out of it. They get all the contaminants out of it. They filter it, everything. And then they recharge that exact same freon once it's been filtered. They can recharge that freon back into a truck. So they also have recovery only equipment. Now, recovery only equipment doesn't do any filtering process. It doesn't do anything else like that. It only takes it out of the system. So whenever you use recovery only equipment, the question that almost every single time is on the test is, what do you have to do if recovery only equipment was used? What do you have to do to put that freon back in a truck or back in a tractor or back in a whatever it is they want to ask? And the answer is always going to be, well, you have to recycle it, or you have to filter it, you have to clean it. They don't like the word filter and clean, they like the word recycle. So answer with the refrigerant has to be recycled before it can be recharged. Refrigerant tanks, whenever you remove refrigerant or put refrigerant back in either a machine and or a vehicle, you have to have the right style of tank, and it has to be stamped and registered with the EPA. So that stamping is either going to be 4BA or 4BW. If it's not stamped there, then it's not a registered DOT registered tank. And therefore it can't be used. You can get in a lot of trouble. Once again, that gets back into the EPA writing you fines and stuff like that. Safety precautions and warnings. Always wear eye protection. R134A, which is the most common, all of them, honestly, all refrigerants, they burn. Freezer burn is what they do. You get it in your eyes, your lungs, your skin, whatever, it burns, and it burns fast, and it burns hard. There's some nasty, nasty, nasty pictures if you want to go see them on Google, something like that. I'm not a fan of showing those personally, but if you want to go see them, go Google refrigerant burns. Oh man, they are disgusting. So don't get it in your eyes. Avoid breathing it. Don't let it get on your skin. Don't put it in an open flame. It can explode. That's a good one. R134A can become combustible when mixed with air under pressure in a sealed environment. So your first question is probably, what in the hell is there ever going to be air under pressure in a sealed environment around 134A? Basically what that says is you don't go grab the air hose off of the wall and the shop air and take it up to the AC system and fill that sucker full of pressure to find a leak or whatever. If you do that, you're basically creating a bomb. You're giving R134A pressure and oxygen to burn. So it can become combustible, and it can become very dangerous really quick. That's why it's, once again, it's highlighted in blue. They like to ask questions about it. When will it become combustible, or what needs to be mixed with it to become combustible? Charge, pressured air in a sealed environment is the right answer on that one. PAG oil precautions. So PAG oil is a skin irritant. It's going to itch. It's going to burn. It's a lot like brake fluid. You ever spill brake fluid on you? I mean, it's not necessarily dangerous, but if you spill it on paint, it'll eat paint. If you spill it on your hand and don't clean it off, it'll itch after a while, maybe turn red. It absorbs moisture. So that means it's hydroscopic. I don't know how many of you know that word, but um, you should. Brake fluid, pag oil. There's a few other things in our industry that's hydroscopic, and that means it sucks all the moisture out of there, all the moisture out of whatever it's on. Um, you need to always know that. What that also means is storage, brake fluid, pag oil, anything like that. You can't ever leave them open. So if you got them out in your shop and you have it sitting open on your toolbox, you just ruined that entire bottle of oil because it just pulled all the moisture out of the atmospheric air into that bottle because it's hydroscopic. And so now you don't want to put that into your AC system because water inside of an AC system is going to freeze up and the AC system's not going to work. Um, do not overfill refrigerant tanks, they can explode. And in other words, unless otherwise directed, do not perform equipment maintenance with equipment connected to electrical power. Right? Don't service a bandsaw if the bandsaw is running, that type of thing. Um, always perform a thorough visual inspection. Um, there's actually a huge list, and I wish I actually had that list. Maybe I do here. Give me just a couple seconds. Um, there's a list on your in your manual. If you go back to the modules tab of exactly what you can look for in a visual inspection, and it's a lot bigger than you'd expect it to be. I mean, there's actually quite a bit that you can go over. We'll cover that list. If you don't want to go look at it right now, we'll be going over that list Thursday and Friday. In class. So it'd be worth taking a look at, just kind of familiarizing yourself. It's actually pretty big. But the obvious stuff are leaks, hoses, rubbing points, making sure that everything works. So all your control switches work, all your blend air doors inside the cabin, which direct airflow, make sure they all work. Make sure your filters aren't plugged up. Make sure your compressor cycles, huge list, goes on and on, but we'll cover those Thursday, Friday, and you ought to take a peek at them later. Um, Service port caps. So this is our high and low pressure side caps right here. This is where we're going to hook up our gauges. These aren't open in the system. It's the only open in the system. They got a Schrader valve that are supposed to seal them off. However, they tend to leak. I mean, it's a Schrader valve. Over time, they're going to start to wear down and leak. It's just a spring pressure seal. So the caps themselves also have little rubber seals in them. They're more or less a backup. You should always make sure these caps are on there. A, just to prevent them from filling with dust, and B, to keep them sealed. Refrigerant identifier, obviously they can help identify refrigerant. Mixed refrigerants are, so if you mix R12 and R134, that's called cross-contamination, and there's very likely going to be a question about that. Hey, what happens if you mix two different types of refrigerants? What's that called? Cross-contamination is the answer. Or it could ask for what's the result going to be. That's going to be operating pressures are going to be too high. You're going to get poor performance because the pressures are way too high and it's not working well together. Don't do it. It's not good. That's why they have the identifier. That's why they have different fittings. That's why all of this is built so that you can't do it. All right. Tips on completing. Oh, shoot. You know what? We're going to call it good for this video. We're already at 14 minutes. I'll set up another video and we'll start talking about refrigerant recovery.